Hello, my name is Christopher Smith, and this is my critical reflection presentation. Um, when it comes to rural lifestyles, my previous understanding on that subject was that there was increased barriers to services such as distance, lack of resources, and lack of transportation. There was a difference in value systems, a difference in belief systems, and a difference in family dynamics when it comes to rural versus urban lifestyles. Throughout the course, my current understanding of that, of rural lifestyles, is that there are still increased barriers to service, such as distance, lack of resources, and a lack of transportation. But when it comes to value systems, while they may be different from their urban counterparts, it's more that they're unique, not so much different. They may have differences in, say, the value they put on education, but that might be because they have a stronger emphasis on going and finding gainful employment early on in a rural setting because of the needs of the family or the circumstances surrounding that particular individual. So the value system may be different, but it's more because of the unique circumstances that impact those values and the development of those values. I said before that they had a different belief system. I think it's more, like I said, now through my understanding of what I've learned in the class, it's more about the fact that they have a stronger belief system a lot of times, especially whenever it comes to religious or spiritual issues. They are very strong in what they believe, very steadfast in what they believe. And they're not necessarily different beliefs. They might just be more pronounced in a rural area because of the strength of that belief. Also, whenever it comes to the family dynamics, once again, I think it's more of a uniqueness of circumstances surrounding those family dynamics that make it different from an urban setting. Not so much that those are different family dynamics than the urban counterparts, but they are unique based on the needs of the family system in a rural area. When it comes to social and economic factors, my previous understanding is there are greater wage disparities in a rural area than in an urban city. There's less protection of rights for minorities in rural areas, and there is less openness to differences. Through the class, my current understanding has become, yes, there are greater wage disparities. That fact did not change. But I think more of the less protection of rights for minorities has turned into an understanding that there's just less resources to help those minorities and to protect the rights of those minorities in the rural areas versus the urban counterparts. So like I said, it's not necessarily that they want to protect those people less. It's just the fact that there's less resources to do so. I also said before that there was less openness to differences. I think that my current understanding has changed to the fact that there's just less education on how to be open to differences. There's less social interactions with people who are different in rural areas. That has not led to the cultural awareness that sometimes those urban populations will develop. So like I said, I don't think it's so much a closed-mindedness as it is just less education and less opportunity to be open to differences in a rural area. The ethics that are involved with working with rural populations did not really change based off of the content of the class. I went into the class knowing that, service for these populations was going to be very important just because they are underserviced and there are so many barriers to services for rural populations. Social justice is still a key part of what we need to maintain a focus on while we are working with these rural populations, because there are a lot of social issues that just are unfair and aren't being addressed in the rural populations. Once again, the dignity and worth of the person, I think that's always important, no matter what area of social work or what population you're working with as a social worker. Like, you should always maintain the dignity and worth of the individual. The importance of human relationships. I think that did get strengthened through the course for me. I understand a little bit more about the depth of some of the problems that these humans are facing and the value that they have to our population and to our communities. So I think I got a better understanding of the importance of human relationships through the class. Then the ethics, of course, of integrity and competence. Those will always be useful no matter what fields you go into in social work or what kind of a population you're working with. I do think it's a little bit more important to be I don't want to say more competent, but more versed in the levels of competency that you'll have to have when working in rural areas, because there are so many conflicting issues and compounding issues for rural populations that will have to be addressed. So I think, if anything, this class has shown me how important it is to be competent as a social worker. When it comes to the beliefs and values, my previous understanding on the beliefs and values in a rural area were that I had a more open-minded belief system. I thought that those in rural settings were not open to people who were different, such as homosexuals like myself, and that those in rural settings do not celebrate differences. Through this class, I've learned a lot about just some of the educational aspects that are lacking, some of the resources that are lacking as far as educating people on their differences. But through what we've learned, I've kind of shifted my understanding on this particular section of the presentation to understand that those in rural settings just don't have as many opportunities to celebrate the differences that are in our cultures in this country. In an urban area, you see a lot of diversity, a lot of different cultural celebrations happening all the time. Whereas in rural areas, it's very, very rare to see any type of a celebration that's not a nationalized American celebration like Christmas or Thanksgiving. You don't see a whole lot of other celebrations of culture in a rural setting. So I think that's more where the problem is. It's not that I have a more open-minded belief system. They just, those people in rural settings just have not had a chance to celebrate the differences like I have, because I have lived in urban areas throughout my life. I also currently understand more that rural areas are actually beginning to accept and embrace diverse groups a lot more than they used to. This is a slow process, but I see a lot of organizations and groups that are trying to spread awareness and to create that acceptance of diversity in rural areas. So like I said, whereas before I thought, that people just weren't open to it, I see now that yes, it's a slow growing process, but we are every day and every year getting closer to those rural areas, gaining that depth and that insight to where they can accept those who are different from them, which is a great change. When it comes to overcoming differences, basically what I said in my first paper for this assignment, my critical reflection paper, I said that the most important part to overcoming differences when working with rural populations is going to be to rely on a social work code of ethics and to maintain an unconditional positive regard for those that I serve. Once again, my current understanding hasn't really changed on that aspect. It's still obviously very important to rely on the social work code of ethics when you work with anybody as a social worker. And it's also really important to always maintain an unconditional positive regard for those that you serve. But I think what really changed or developed through this class was that I had a very closed-minded understanding that I was different from the populations that I would be serving, that there would be a lot of barriers to working with rural populations just because of who I am as a person, and the beliefs and values that I have as a person. But through a lot of the course content, I've learned that yes, the rural populations may not be where they need to be as far as, accepting diversity and all of those aspects, but I don't think it's so much because they're different or because they're unwilling to be as accepting of different cultures or people. I think it's more, like I said, that there's just not the access to resources to fully understand or fully embrace the cultural differences that are in our society. So I think, like I said, my biggest takeaway from the class has been that rural populations aren't that different from me. Whenever it comes down to it, they're still good people, they're still valuable people, and there's still people that need our help as social workers. So that's about all I have for my critical paper presentation. Thank you so much, and I've enjoyed your class.